You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hello, beautiful. It's Alex here. I am back for day 24 of our 28-day Flowing with Your Cycle series. I am so excited that you're here, and also hard to believe that it's already day 24. Welcome to the middle of phase 4 of your cycle. Depending on if it's shorter or longer, you might be getting super close to your period, maybe not, but all of these concepts are still going to apply in this phase, no matter how long it is for you. So we're actually going to talk about guilt today. And the reason that we're going to talk about guilt is because, as you heard, phase 3 and phase 4 are all about the overall umbrella concept is detoxing when it comes to our hormone health. And you have likely noticed that there are components of that kind of throughout the bigger picture discussion that we're having. And guilt is one of the things that we're going to talk about detoxing today from our lives, because it is very, very often this omnipresent feeling for many of us. And it seems that kind of the higher we function, the more guilt we tend to pick up, because as we do a lot of things and have accomplishments, then it reinforces the idea that we're using guilt to be a motivator and a driver for ourselves, but it's also one of the things that is constantly putting the brakes on us, because guilt tends to be one of the lowest vibration feelings. Like, think about when you are irritable, or we talked about irritability yesterday, right? When you're irritable and you shouldn't be doing what you're doing because you've said that's not how I want to act, and so you're watching yourself behave in a certain way, and you feel either instantly or shortly thereafter guilty for doing the thing that right? And that's a little bit of the double sword of awareness, is that sometimes people are like, I wish I just hadn't been aware of it, because then I would just act that way and it was no big deal, right? Like, it didn't feel good, but it wasn't the not feeling good plus the knowledge that I don't want to go that way and the guilt that follows. And I think a lot of us try to make the guilt really mean something. And while all emotions are valuable when they have a time and a place, the ratio of times where it serves us to experience guilt and the vast majority of kind of guilt-ridden life that a bunch of us are living in, the ratio is just way too skewed towards this constant feeling of guilt and shame in our lives around every single decision and thing that we do, especially when we haven't done the work of being like, what is my actual expectation of this, right? In a couple episodes ago, we talked about that concept of balance and really bringing an awareness to that. But that alone, unless we really look at guilt in general, that is not always the full answer to it. So guilt can show up in a lot of different ways, and I would encourage in this part of the cycle to first chunk it down to as it relates to where you're going, right? You set your own GPS where you're going, so you know that as I'm talking. Where in this portion of your life are you experiencing guilt? right? Whether it's moving your body in a different way, fueling it in a different way, healing whatever tangible, outcome that you have set. Right? This isn't, it can't be cycle after cycle, like, I want to be healthy, right? That's too nebulous. But the whatever it is, how is guilt impacting this part of your life? So that's question one. And then with that, like we talked about, a lot of times that same strategy, whatever's driving that, is going to be present in other areas of our life. And for many of us, we use guilt as a way to try to move away from certain behaviors, right? If we're just guilty enough about it, we won't do it. But if I had a nickel for every time I felt guilty about eating certain foods, throughout my life, I've talked about orthorexia and like running marathons and not feeding myself, and then when I even got healthy, it was like all the beating up that I did of, oh, that wasn't paleo enough, or that was not good for my SIBO, and on it goes. If I had a nickel for every one of those, I wouldn't have had to do student loans for medical school, right? It's ridiculous how much I have spent time feeling guilty and beating myself up, and that played 0% of a role in my healing. So, at this point, I've healed from SIBO and 18 years of chronic pain and premature ovarian failure, reversed those. My levels came back up, right? All of these things happened, and 0% of it was accomplished through making myself feel guilty. 0%. Therefore, what does that mean for you when you hear that? Is that a novel concept? Because I feel like for myself, I didn't even know what it looked like, or that it was possible to not use guilt as a motivator, to be like, in experiencing guilt, it's my way of announcing to myself, oh, I know what I did wrong. I'm going to punish myself with this, and I won't do it again. But we are not, parents to ourselves just in one way. More often than not, when you have a kid or kids in your life, if something doesn't work for them, many people don't just rely on that one thing and keep doing it. They're trying to change the strategy based on the kid that you have and that you're around, right? And it's the same thing for ourselves. If guilt is our major strategy for that, and it's not working, if it was anyone else, you'd probably stop and think, what else can I do that works for this person? But for whatever reason, guilt is so kind of built into the deal that most of us don't stop and think about the fact that not only is it not helping, like I said, it contributed 0% to my healing and my evolution, like what you see me now, but it kept me stuck for a really, really long period of time. Because what essentially happens is that every time we crack the whip and use guilt for ourselves, and we do it over and over and over again, when you zoom out, it puts a major kind of dent / it completely destroys our self-esteem, right? Because if we had a loved one and everything they did, it was, guilt, you did that wrong, it was this, you did that wrong, we would destroy that person's self-esteem, and they would not want to be around us. How much does someone that constantly feel that they are getting guilt from you want to show up for you in the best way possible, right? They may show up and try to do the best they can to not make you upset, but it's not that they're going to be in a place of power where they're thinking creatively, they're feeling strong, they're feeling good, they're being authentic to themselves, they're doing it in the way that that's their superpower, right? When we empower people to behave that way, then it allows them the space to do that and to show up in that way. if we're constantly guilting them, people don't show up empowered. If you've had a boss that's been really critical, right? When you do a project, you're not thinking, how do I do this project to the best of my ability? Like, what's the creative power available to me, and how do I make this awesome? You're kind of like, gosh, where are all the things that they've yelled at me about in the past and nitpicked, and how do I ensure that I just don't do those things? It's a very, very different mindset. And when you have been in that situation, I'm sure you've had something like this, most of us shut down. We actually shrink. We get smaller. We start to lose the reserve that says, how do I make this work? How do I make this happen in the best way possible, right? It's expansion, it's vision, it's potential, it's effort into the way that we work best, which is, there's a time and a place for effort, even though we've been talking about it's not all meant to be hard work. Those things are our creative license. It's how we express in the world as we do things and create things. Now, when we are contracted because we are constantly motivating ourselves through guilt, it does the exact same thing. We're not thinking about how do we find balance? What are my expectations for ourselves? What is it that I really need that I'm trying to get from these things that I feel out of control with sometimes, or things that I don't believe serve me, right? What else am I missing in my life that I'm trying to fill with this that is an inappropriate way for me to do it? Not, only you can decide what that is, but essentially that's the expansive thinking that we can get into. Or guilt ends up being the dead end, because there's no thought process that extends much past feeling guilty about it, right? Guilt is just kind of, ooh, I shouldn't have done it, now I feel bad. And when you feel bad, your heart's not in it, your shoulders are down, everything about your physiology with guilt gets impacted, and your emotional space, your ability to think clearly, to see opportunities in front of you, that kind of goes out the window when we inject a bunch of guilt into the situation. So my sort of petition to you in this is that while the goal is not to make any emotion off the table, but just like you may detox your home from chemicals or beauty products that you don't use any longer because you're like, the hormone mimicking substances, not my friend, right? Or plastic in your house. Where is all the guilt? Is there a bunch of guilt clutter laying around really impacting your ability to move forward and show up in the best way for yourself? And how can we detox from that? And some of it, like sometimes I use plastic for certain situations, and that's totally appropriate, right? If we do something and we feel guilty and it truly is, that emotion is letting us know of something going on that we believe, super duper helpful. However, those instances end up being much, 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 much less common than the frequency with which we experience guilt about everything in a way that doesn't even serve us. It's not letting us know. We already, you probably already know, I didn't want to eat that, right? You don't need the guilt to let you know that again for the upteenth day of your life, that you didn't like the way you ate, right? It's no longer serving you in any way, even as an information channel, other than to let you know this is the habitual pattern of thinking that I have. But again, once you realize that potentially you have a habitual habit around using guilt as an attempt to change, well, you only need to have that once really to understand, okay, this may not be serving me as much as my brain tries to tell me it is, right? The stories around this is how I get better can be really strong, but like we've talked about before, there's nothing in the brain, the way that it's wired, that's static. It's constantly rewiring. And if the same outcomes are happening, is because the same things are getting rewired. It's not that they don't get taken apart and get back together. It's that they're actually remade anew. And so at each point, we have the opportunity to shift away from that and really decide, if this is not motivating me as much as my brain likes to tell me that it's motivating me, where is the opportunity then to choose other options? What other strategies do you have? And at this point, it's really cool because in the cycle, you've done a lot of thinking. Where do you use certain tools? What behaviors do you have that help you? What gets you out of a funk? What makes you feel good? What was fun for you that you discovered, right? All of these aspects that we've been finding out about ourselves through the cycle, this is where we can say, out of that whole deli of choices, and then there's guilt. How am I going to bring in other things and, leave guilt for its appropriate use at certain times where it may be, helpful? But what else do I have going on? What are the other things, right? And once we start to look at that, and the guilt just becomes a little ding that says an alternative, instead of guilt, what other way can I make myself feel right now? So if it's guilt around eating a certain thing, then, the guilt can let us know, what is the meaning of the food that I ate? Why did I crave it? Or what about it made me feel guilty? And then this is where you can pivot. If what I'm looking for is connection, and you figured out some fun things that you like to do that also gives you connection, you just say, I see you, guilt. Noted. I'm going to go give myself the joy and the fun here through that connection. Give myself what I need and do it in a way that helps me. And then if you've ever, I'm sure that at some point in life you've kind of done that, where you said, I'm not going to stew in this now, I'm going to pivot and go over here. A lot of times you're having a conversation with that friend, you're having a great time, and boom, you get the next idea of what to do, right? It wasn't in the stewing and your guilt that the idea came. It was in you kind of knocking off, having a good time, goofing around, and then the answer, the solution, the outcome followed from there. So I have less, to say about what you choose once the guilt, you start noticing it and start to understand your relationship with it. But at this point, you have many other days of things that you have learned about yourself and those strategies. This is where you just get to say, today, with that awareness, what do I want to do instead? And that's it. You can pick whatever it is that you like, whatever that jives with you today. I love the concept of balance and in phase 4, because what a cool experience to begin to live our lives from that place of, I get to make this feel and flow and be easy in whatever way that I would like. There's lots to accomplish, there's lots to do, there's lots of massive actions to take, and phase 4 is always there to remind us that the outcomes that we're looking for, right, the goals that we hit, those are not going to be the answers to the guilt. It's not that when you get healthy and you immediately forget to feel guilty about food. I can tell you from having been there, if I hadn't addressed the guilt, it would have taken me longer to actually get to my goal, but also I would have just continued doing that. That was just a reflex thing. There wasn't anything that was going to change that except for me actually changing it and me making decisions around it. So I hope that this is causing some aha moments. I think for a lot of us, once we truly see what we do to ourselves with guilt, and understand how much it can keep us small, then the releasing of it is also just as impactful, right? So just to wrap this episode up, let's not add guilt about being guilty, which I've totally done. Let's not sit in that too long. Sometimes we can acknowledge that, wow, I was really mean to myself. I really do kind of feel guilty about that. And yet, I'm going to release that. I'm going to release it because I choose to love myself fully. And I cannot do that if I'm just adding on the backpacks and the weights and the ankle weights on myself that say, wow, you really messed it up again, right? It's okay to experience it, but be that parent. Find the way to say, I hear you, and today, with what I know, I'm going to choose differently. And then you just choose differently as much as possible until that becomes the predominant thing, because that in reality is how you got to using guilt in the first place, right? You started trying it on, and sometimes you saw that it worked, and so you're like, oh cool, that works, so then you kept doing it. It's the same thing here. You didn't always use guilt, and this is sometimes you will return to it, and then that'll just be another reminder to go, okay, I see you. My brain has the habit built in to go to there, but it does not have to be the ultimate determinant of who I am and how I'm going to treat myself in this moment. Alrighty, thank you so much for joining me. This is a big one. Happy healing. I love you guys so much. Thank you for joining me, and I will catch you on the next one.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.